meet her. We have another fantastic guest in Ivana Richey. And it's how are you doing, Ivana?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here today.
we came to get to know Ivana in a roundabout way. I had seen some posts that she had done without knowing that she had already done a podcast with one of our friends, Teresa Carpenter, and it was a really cool topic, and as far as bullying was concerned. But then, as I did some more research, I found out that you really go deep into the emotional duress of just everyday folks, especially in women's issues. But I don't even know if you call them issues as much as you just call the things that everyone deals with on a day-to-day basis. And I'll leave it at. And it's been fun to see the impact that you have had, and that's why we had to reach out. So thank you for making the time to be here.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. And I just love these type of conversations. And this is how we can reach more people, which is what I'm all about.
I like it. Well, I've got to ask you straight up, what is a trauma-informed mentor? I looked at that and I thought, wow, trauma-informed mentor. Explain what that is.
Well, it's someone with a deep understanding of trauma and how it affects each individual. So the understanding that I have of trauma, I utilize in everything that I do, in the books that I write, in the speeches that I give, in the trainings that I do, in the coaching that I do, in every conversation, other than when I'm just hanging with friends, because obviously it's not appropriate to pick someone's life apart all the time. But I think we all need to have a basic understanding of trauma, how it affects our nervous system, our mindset, and how we actually are in a position today based on a lot of things that have happened in our past. And I believe until we really understand how we've been wired, it's not until then that we can break it and really create our new identity.
I like it.
I would think that since you are an informed trauma mentor, you probably have a story surrounding trauma.
Oh yeah.
And I know everyone's story is very unique. And, and as someone that's helping other people, some people can learn about trauma through schooling, or some people just go through trauma. What was your story? How did you become where you are?
I definitely went through it, and I didn't know about it until later. I went through it. It was more on an emotional basis, which I just thought it was part of everybody's life. I also experienced bullying, and I actually did have the courage to speak up and ask for help from my mom and actually a principal as well. So that was broken. And I think back with everything, especially now that's going on in the US, and there's always the symptoms that are being talked about and addressed. But I asked myself, where would I have been if I didn't have the courage and the trust and the intimacy with the people in my life to actually talk about it and have that put to this, have that ended once and for all. And then people will say, well, I wouldn't do that. I would do this, or I wouldn't do that. But we all respond to trauma differently. So instead of looking at the symptoms, I like to go deep and look at the root causes when it comes to organizations, when it comes to relationships. So I experienced the bullying. And then there were a lot of emotional things that happened throughout my life that led me to a very dark place personally inside of myself. But on the outside, I was very social. Yeah. I got things done. I graduated with a 4.0 GPA. I played on 3 different basketball teams. I played on the youth national basketball team. I played for a top Division I basketball school here in the US. And everything looked great on the outside. I dated who I wanted, and I just got things done. So I had the A personality. And then when I started dissecting myself, I realized I had extreme sadness inside of me. And I felt like I was at some point of some kind of depression, if I want to label it today. And that's what actually led me to the journey of starting to dissect myself. Where did this come from? Why do I feel like this? Because it feels like no matter how much I achieve, there's so much pain and so much emptiness inside of me. And that's kind of what kickstarted my journey of healing and eventually led me to do this on a larger scale.
I've got to ask on that because so I've mentioned on other shows where I was bullied when I was growing up too. You probably got bullied because you were taller. I was bullied because I was just different. I'm short too. But anyway, with that being said, to your point, I didn't know the impact of it until you looked years later and you realize that it was, you can't, for those of you not watching it, it filters in and you feel pounded in. And there's two ways it comes out: explosively, or the way that you did it, where it is dissecting it. What I'm interested in is how do you, especially with a lot of talks on mental health, and a matter of fact, without even digging into some of the interviews we had in the past, they've actually brought up mental health. And I have seen that where it's blown up. Where what would your suggestion be of systematically attacking it instead of that explosiveness that it really does nobody any good? And I can speak from experience on that all day long, but it's a long way of asking, what's your advice?
I think the biggest thing is looking at it from a perspective that a lot of us don't want to look at it. And I think that until we're willing to look at it from this perspective that I'm going to share, nothing will really change. So I think there's too much judgment and there's too much of picking sides, right or wrong. Yes, we're living on Earth, so there is duality here. But until we can get to the point when we realize everybody has the potential. So one thing I got from my husband, we talked about something and I said, do you never worry? He said, no, because I live with the mindset that everybody has the potential, including myself, right? So when we realize that we also have a darkness within us, and I'm not only talking about the shame, the guilt, the fears, but also that all the untapped potential, right? I turned a lot of my pain into beautiful things, beautiful speeches, beautiful books and creations, and I've been able to help people. Until we understand that we all have that and we can look at another human being without judgment, I don't think anything is going to change. And this is why I talk about it when it comes to you as an individual, because until you figure yourself out, you're consistently going to have that lens because you have repressed things inside of yourself. And this is why my husband and I were really passionate about going to prisons, jails, juvenile detention centers, and really seeing people for who they are and seeing the greatness within them. And I think as the more work we do internally, and then we start, spreading it like here, and then it's like a ripple effect, but it's a raise in our consciousness that it would have to take, little by little, and then that accumulates.
Oh, wow. I just, it hits me because I remember the one time I did explode. It was 7th grade. I'll never forget it. And this guy was just incessantly teasing me from race to height or whatever. And I remember one time a friend was beating up on him and he was on the ground. And I remember I was so enraged. I went over there and I wouldn't let him get up. And it was one of those things I'd never felt rage like that. But at the same time, there was a degree of empathy because when I saw him for who he was, it was, even at that young age, I just remember what I'm holding right now isn't right. It's not right at all. And I don't want to be this person that I'm feeling right now because it's powerful. It was really powerful. I was in the dominant position now. And it was something that I wish I would have known that side of the individual. And sometimes the differences are we allow to become so divisive that we forget about dialogue. And I know you went through all types of things and we could go through it. It almost feels like a therapy session. But at the same time, how then do you channel that into a dialogue? I mean, going into corporations, it's easy to have that discussion because so many people have been impacted by it. But as individuals ourselves, sometimes we don't have everyone going through it with us. We have to deal with it. And sometimes we don't approach an individual or the topic or what have you. But I want to get your take on that.
Can you reframe the question there at the end?
Yeah. Essentially, how do we as individuals have that dialogue instead of acting out in such a way that is counterproductive and even damaging to fixing the situation? And this is especially in this particular case, it was a bullying case, but helping the individual themselves understand that they have a tremendous amount of power to invoke that dialogue that would lead to better solutions than perpetuating the problem.
Okay, yeah, I love that question. I think you can look at it from different perspectives. Excuse me, but I think a big thing that I want to start doing, and which I've already started proposing, for example, in schools, we need teachers to be trauma informed, okay? Because a lot of them become teachers because of their own trauma, just like police officers become police officers because they were bullied or treated a certain type of way, and so on and so forth. Lawyers become lawyers because they had to survive their whole life, and they become really independent, and they want to prove to the world that they can get everything done, right? So we have to look at professions. A lot of us choose professions based on the trauma that we've been through, just like we choose partners based on what kind of wounds we have. So when we understand this, yes, each individual needs to do the work. I think it's great with the online industry because more and more people, like you saw my post, what if the next person sees my post? Wow, maybe I have that. Maybe I'm going through that. So for me, on an individual level, the internet is great and all the self-help out there, but I'm not a person who believes in that tools are enough. I don't believe in coping. I believe in getting to the root cause of things and understanding that you have the power within yourself. So with teachers, we can train teachers to become trauma informed, understand their own attachment styles, understand themselves, and understand maybe this student is bothering me so much because they're reminding me of my dad. Okay, maybe this student, I resonate with her and him so much because they have a quality that my mother or the person who I felt the most connected to in my life, they're reminding me of that person, or I get to be a person to them that I needed to be for someone else, and so on and so forth. People need to be able to see themselves. And then people have to see that we are all one. And this is kind of the same thing with police officers. And when they pull someone over, we don't see people like us. And that goes back to what I was talking about before. So we can do it individually, but then we have to start training teachers. We have to start training police officers. And it's always like, oh, how can we add more rules, more regulations, more punishment? Nothing is approached that way. Always about rehabilitating people and making sure that people get better. So that's kind of how I look at it. But more people need to be open to it and really see it's always about the root cause. You continue to brush it under the rug and say, oh, mental health is just an excuse. It's not an excuse. What's going on, right? So if our schools allowed my husband and I to come in and speak on bullying, that one kid who did whatever he did, he wouldn't have been bullied in the first place, and maybe he wouldn't have acted out.
I'm sorry. What I think is really interesting though too is I think there's an element of awareness that comes with trauma, and so like you were giving the example of, I can think of both, the examples you gave of like a teacher or a policeman, and sometimes they go in those professions and they perpetuate the trauma or the same habits that affected them because they don't have that awareness is what I'm understanding, and they don't realize it. So you end up with say for example the policeman that has the bad attitude and the power trip, and then what's crazy about that is that they're also going into a profession that is extremely traumatic. And so it seems like it almost, if you're not careful, and if those people in these high stress environments aren't given a way to understand trauma and a way to deal with trauma, they're being set up for failure. Have you seen that as well?
Definitely. And we also know how big of an impact a doctor has too, right? And today we know with science that we can basically heal ourselves from a lot of things, and people can look into how you can use the power of thought and the power of your emotions. So what if we had trauma-informed doctors, not just the physical trauma that they're trained for, what if they were actually trained? I've had so many doctors say that they were never taught about anything when it comes to acute trauma. That's it. What if they spoke to patients like, okay, this is what it is, but let's focus on this and let's be positive about this. And I've seen so many cases where something else happened. So they have a tremendous impact because people take doctors' words like verbatim. So I think it can make a huge difference in so many different professions, and then that will affect the individuals that put all their trust in those people. So definitely.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying, that falls under that root, get down to the root cause and also the root healing portion of the equation as well. That's a really good one. I work in the medical field, so in emergency departments, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Love that. Super cool. There you go.
And speaking of the root, I mean, even in corporations, they have the root cause analysis. I mean, from an organizational development standpoint, we always talked about getting down to the root cause, using a root cause analysis, whatever the tool might be. Now, once you're at the root, though, even in from a mental standpoint, how then do you build upon what you've discovered? And let me explain this. So many times, and ironically, I learned about something like this from a religious talk. But the reason that so many things fail is that we get to the root cause, and all of a sudden we processize and we proceduralize everything instead of being normal and natural. And I think oftentimes the reason that when we discovered the root cause is that if we're not allowed to be that normal and natural, that we feel like it's being dumped on. And so how do we still maintain that normal and natural way to deal with something that takes steps? Does that make sense?
Yes. It's not a short, brief answer, really. But when I think about summarizing it, I think we have to understand that we have created a society that supports us living from our trauma. And we have to be willing, when we get on this journey, we have to be willing to let go of who we think we are. And in companies, there's so much about, oh, take this personality test so you can put yourself more in a box. Well, I am INJFK, whatever, right? So is this really who you are, or is this an accumulation of your experiences and your trauma? And then we put like, oh, you're an extrovert, you're an introvert. And then we kind of try to put people in these boxes. But what you'll find is the more you heal, the more you'll shift. So if you're an extrovert, it's most likely that you have more of an anxious attachment style and you need other people because that's what you're so used to. That's what you had growing up. So when you don't have that, you freak out. So an extrovert needs to learn how to be on their own and fill themselves up. And an introvert needs to learn how to trust more people because they've been avoided. So it's definitely a journey, having a workplace where the culture is really self-discovery. And because everybody say, oh, we want our employees to flourish and grow and to become the best version of themselves. So we got to start taking the labels off and having people really uncover who they are and challenge each other in other ways. So there's no quick answer to that. It's more just like your journey is an adventure and a journey for the rest of your life. It needs to be that in companies as well, where people get to discover who they are and there's like a safe environment for that. And we're not boxing up people with labels.
Yeah. And it really begs the fact too of or actually rather begs the topic of adaptability. If we're not addressing those root causes, if we're not really taking those means to get out of our bubble, the ability to adapt and even to bridge. The bridge has been, Gary, that's another thing we've heard a lot about is bridging, right? The inability to do that further it leads to other areas of mental health. At least that what we've found in some of these interviews. Is that also something that you found?
Definitely. But I think when there's a safe space to explore ourselves and get to know ourselves, we stop looking at people a certain type of way. I may have had a bad interaction with you yesterday, and then I show up at work looking at you from the perspective of who you were yesterday. but we're losing like trillions of cells like all the time, and we're becoming new people all the time, like on a biological level too. And it's, can we meet people from where they are at this very moment? I think it's huge. So if you're not doing the inner work yourself, and if that's not encouraged, then you're going to look at other people the same way that you're judging yourself, because you're stuck in the past and you're saying you're still this person. And then we continue to label each other and continue to see each other from the same perspective. So how do we see each other? Like I see you guys, like I see you here, and I don't know anything about you. So I'm completely open. But what if we could be more open to the people that are actually already in our lives? Like, I'm going to see you for who you are at this very moment, but it takes an incredible amount of like relaxation, inner peace, and being open, but you can't be open if you're not open to see yourself. And that's what I like to talk about.
Well, you said one word that is just, I don't know, it just really hit me hard, and that is seeing people with their potential.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to get, that also is for individuals as well. Like, I know that's something I'm not very good at. I'm pretty hard on myself in a lot of ways, but I'm really good at looking at the potential in other people. And I mean, I think that's one thing that I actually do fairly well. I know Maurice does as well. But man, there's a lot of power in that. It really does change your focus. It really changes the way you interact with others when you look at it through that lens. But I think as humans, we also kind of suck at doing that for ourselves, which is unfortunate. But one of the things you also said, we kind of glossed over a little bit of this root cause analysis, or getting down to the root cause. Trauma to me is something that I think everyone experiences, whether it's, on one end of the pendulum, it's trauma that we don't even know that we have, that we're carrying. On the far end of the other pendulum, it's like those huge events that come out of left field, like a car accident or a death or something, or, some kind of abuse that happens like right now. Mm-hmm. How do you, with something that's so encompassing, what are some of those, you say get down to the root cause, what are kind of the common themes that you see in something that has such a broad spectrum?
Mm-hmm. The most common thing, I think the easiest way to look at it is, and I use these words to just kind of make it simple to people. Well, do you have daddy issues, or do you have mommy issues, for example? That's what I like to say. Do you have the father wound, or do you have the mother wound? So we all share complicated relationships with our parents. What I see a lot, because you mentioned, it's easy for you to see the best in other people. People who are the empaths, people who care about other people who are fully in tune with everybody's emotions, but who feel like they're the only ones that should be left out, and they hope that one day they'll receive love. These are the people who grew up with a complicated relationship with their mom. What I see with a lot of people is they don't see that even though they grew up with really amazing parents, right? This comes to, oh, my parents were great, and all our parents did the best that they could. They don't acknowledge that they were still wounded by that relationship. And it doesn't have to be direct. It could have been that your mom was really great to you, but you witnessed her being abused by your dad, or you witnessed her giving up on her dreams, and you witnessed her walking on eggshells and allowing people to do whatever they wanted to do to her. And then you internalize that. And now as a grown man, you're doing the same thing, not realizing, and then you're just attracting very masculine women, and you're so used to being the one who has to do everything for everyone. So I like to look at those two wounds to kind of start off with, because people don't even know how they've been impacted. And that's what I think is kind of fun to help people break down.
Yeah, it's fun go ahead, Gary.
No, I was just yeah, that's interesting. Go ahead, Mo.
No, I was just thinking it's pretty neat how you see it, because again, we have similar backgrounds in education, so it's neat to see how you're taking those two worlds and making it even from a professional level, but then really getting into that personal level. And that's what goes into coaching, right? Because sometimes we might not understand everything that we're experiencing, or maybe we might in fact understand, but we don't have a sounding board. And that's that's something from a coaching perspective that is so incredibly powerful, is that process of not only self-discovery, but what's the word I'm looking for? Holding yourself accountable is essentially what it is. And to have that individual there, that's what makes it so powerful. Now I have another thing associated, because I have kids. Gary has kids, and one's going to college and so on and so forth. So how do we help our kids with everything that's going on? There's this massive comparison game out there. I mean, let's look at TikTok, Facebook, you name it. And all you're seeing is people at their best, or at times their absolute worst. And there's no real in-betweens. What types of things can we utilize to have a healthy perspective of not only others, but also of ourselves? And especially within the teen realm.
Are you talking about you as a parent?
No, just in general, just in general.
Just in general, I think the comparison game is huge, and competition is a part of it. So comparison and competition usually activates our sympathetic nervous system. So automatically we go into stress, and we go into worry, and we start feeling afraid and worrying about the future. So I think self-awareness is the key thing in everything. And you as a parent, you are the leader, you are the role model. So the more you grow and heal yourself and work on yourself, and you walk the path of not being worried about everything. And when everybody else is freaking out, you're staying calm, right? And you have a different type of attitude. And then your kids will ask you, Dad, how come everybody is freaking out and they're afraid, but you just say, oh, let's just breathe, like using an example. And you get to share that perspective with them. So it's important to teach, taking the time out for yourself, going out in nature, visualizing, imagining what kind of life you want to create, and maybe using people from the past as an example to show there is a different way. The imposter syndrome is just growing and growing and growing, but a lot of it comes from trauma. So being willing to look at where everything is stemming from and start working on that, eventually start detaching, because you recognize your own power and you start utilizing that for creation, for impact, for collaboration. And then that goes away. And I like to say, if you're constantly comparing yourself with another coach, for example, like unfollow that coach and just use your social media for creation until you feel like, I can see this without being extremely triggered. So we can channel things into different directions and into different forms.
So I'm going to take this.
Okay, as humans, we're always looking for the shortcut. And so you were talking about the physiological aspect of trauma. What are some of the tips that you can throw out for, like, okay, I'm in a totally stressful environment. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I can't handle this situation. What are some things that people can do right now to help bring it down and kind of take control of that situation?
First thing, they have to recognize that they're in a stressful state, because you can sense it in your body, right? You're feeling the cortisol and the adrenaline is pumping through your body. Oh, okay, I'm extremely stressed right now. And then the next thing that you do is you direct your awareness and your breath inward, right? You can place your hands on your heart and you just breathe. You have to bring yourself back into your body. And if it's extremely stressful, extremely dangerous, maybe if you're in the workplace, go to the bathroom, detach yourself from the environment if the environment is what triggered it. Of course, the trigger comes from something else, right? There's something deeper, but this is the immediate trigger. So recognize it, go within, and then try to remove yourself from the environment. I would say it's the quickest thing. It's the same thing if you are in a relationship, you as a couple, you have to bring your attention inward, because otherwise, since you have all this energy pumping into your limbs, you're going to want to attack the other person, because everything is a threat, because you're operating from the state of survival. So recognize it, go within, and then remove yourself if you feel like you still haven't calmed down.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to take us on a different tangent. I just saw a squirrel time.
Squirrels. I see them every day on my walks.
Oh yeah, that's it. So it's funny because I have kept a journal since about fourth grade. And it's funny because oftentimes Gary and I will talk, and I'll read a journal discussion, something I wrote 20 something years ago when we were hanging out in college, right? Just we're having a crazy laugh, but it evokes those memories of what that feeling was like, what we were experiencing, just like it was yesterday. You remember that, Gary? We were just dying on some of these things, but at the same time, it is a great, it is a coping mechanism. Sometimes I'm writing in there, and it's amazing what it does to your mental health. It really has. It's been fantastic. I don't know how anyone goes without writing in their journal. And so when I came across one of your books, it said Self-Love Healing Journal. Journal your way into healing. I could have told you that, but with that being said, how did you discover the healing process or the healing power of writing in the journal? And what epiphanies did you capture in that, having never read that book, but what are a high level overview of how that works?
It's a great question. I used to write in my diary when I was a little girl, but more so things that happened and, my crushes and things like that. Then for a very long time throughout my life, I didn't write anything, but I was reading a lot. And there was a point in 2017 or 18, I believe, where I had so much pain, all kinds of pain. And I had stopped playing basketball, and now I'm going on to be an entrepreneur. And I was just overwhelmed, and my back was hurting because I had been neglecting that while I was playing basketball. So this is what happens when we start healing. We start getting all kinds of aches and pains when we start resting for the first time in our lives, because that's not a thing. And I was just overwhelmed, and I was thinking about all the things that happened in my life, and I was doing more processing, and it got to the point where I couldn't take the pain anymore. It was so overwhelming. And I was laying in bed. I was thinking about, okay, do we have to go to the hospital for an injection because I had extreme sciatica pain? And then just in a moment, I just heard or told myself, I don't remember, what if I can use this pain to help other people? I'm stuck in this bed, but what can I do? And then the idea just came to me. I hadn't even journaled myself. I'm like, well, what if I create a journal that takes women, even men actually buy my journal, even though it says for women, where I take them on the journey of healing. And then I started with the past, like what happened in your past. And then the other part of the journal is your present. And then the last part of the journal is your future. So without knowing what that was going to turn into, while I was writing the journal, I was kind of journaling inside of myself too. And it was very therapeutic. And I used everything that I had done or how I've been working through my healing, not through writing, but I put it into writing so I could guide my customers through that process. And that's how I transcended a lot of that pain that I was going through. And I published it really fast too. So it just boom, happened like that.
You just gave me the name of your podcast right there. Boy, it's going to be a long title, but that's just fine because it is a way that we can laugh, cry, and everything. Sharing some of the things that with my buddy here, Gary, it was so therapeutic in some cases. I mean, we were laughing for a long time, man. It didn't matter that he had a long day, that I had dealt with some crappy clients or what have you. It was like, oh my goodness. And so it reminds you of the good times, but also the fact that you're learning. And how did it resonate when you first released that?
I don't know. I was so excited. I didn't have the intention of, I have to reach an X amount of people or I need to make a certain amount of money from this book. It was just like, I just felt it in my soul that people needed it. Yeah. And so when I released it, I kind of just trusted that it would take care of itself. And that was it. There was not too much more to it. I didn't really have any expectations. So.
Well, the fact that you said that guys are buying something that was geared for the women, that says a lot.
Well, Well, I have to say, going off what you said, Mo, and this is important. This was important for me. Is a lot of times we'd go back and we look at those events that we were going through, and at the time they were all encompassing. They were in our face, and they were very important, and sometimes they were very difficult. But it's also exciting to look back and see that, okay, in the grand scheme of things, in the big perspective, like, we made it through it. Things are good. We're stronger, and that just seems so. I think it also gives people the understanding that, man, I can do hard things. I can get through some hard stuff, and I can come out the backside and be ready for the next challenge that comes along in life. I think there's a lot of good in that as well.
Yeah,
Love that.
So, okay, I don't have to ask. Okay, I'm going to ask you this, and I hope that you, I don't know, this may be kind of a random question, but you're a very, very strong person. You, through the work that you've done, with trauma and that type of thing. But who are some of the people in your life when you just can't do it yourself? They're your mentors. They're the people that you go to, and why are they important to you? And what makes them your go-to people? What traits do they have that make them the person that you need in difficult situations? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, you're making me a little emotional over here.
That was his point.
Throughout my life, it's definitely been my mom, and it's also my husband, and he's had an incredible impact on me, and he's helped me see the world from a completely different perspective. He's helped me a lot. I've forgiven things that I could never forgive before because of my conversations with him. I've hired coaches also throughout the years. I love to research like ancient civilizations. I love to listen to Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, and Billy Carson, and these incredible people who just have such a profound way of looking at life. But my go-to person for getting through something or shifting my perspective, it's definitely my husband, for sure.
Well, I have to say, as I was flipping through your Instagram, I was hoping you would say that. You just seemed like a pretty cool cat.
Yeah, 100%. And the beauty of it is so opposite too, right? It's so opposite, and how that fits in just making us better. It doesn't. We're sometimes so concerned with sameness that we forget it's the complete opposite end of the spectrum that helps us so much. I love it.
But I think it's kind of interesting too that many times, in stressful and traumatic times of our life, where we're in that physiological state of trauma, the tendency is to withdraw and to pull away. And so I think it's so important for people to have their people or individuals to have their people. You know what I mean? I think there's, whether it's a mentor or a coach or a friend or whatever. And I think part of that too is having someone that's actually a positive influence, because there's also the potential to be drawn towards someone that is toxic and that makes it worse. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give someone for establishing their people?
Their people?
Yeah.
Getting comfortable with being on your own, and not just comfortable, taking it to the next level, really enjoying your own presence, your own company, seeing the good in you.
Maybe the potential?
Your potential, for sure. The untapped, like there's so much. Even now, we have this amazing conversation, but there's so much to us, or we have so much depth that we have yet to discover. So definitely getting yourself to that place. And I think a lot of people, there's like this cancel culture now, and a lot of people think, oh, well, I realize now my mom and I, or my dad and I, we didn't have the best relationship. The answer is just to cut him off and set boundaries. But for me, it's all about, where are you operating from? And is that really what you truly desire? Or do you really desire peace and forgiveness, and then creating something that works for you both? So I look at things of how can you create that within yourself, because just establishing boundaries doesn't mean that you have healed on the inside. And then when it comes to your people are going to be attracted to you. So I met my husband at a personal development workshop because I was working on myself. I have met some incredible people that I've connected with over the years because I've felt really excited about my own company. And that's how I think you create your own type of crew. I was never in cliques growing up,
Yeah.
but I knew someone from each clique and then I brought them together and then we hung out. So the more you're you, the more you'll connect with your people, I would say.
I
And I think
love that.
that's so important because I know many times, like, you know, sometimes one of my girls will say, like, well, I can't wait to get a boyfriend or whatever. And I'm like, man, be you, enjoy being you. And then that will come secondarily, as opposed to that's not the cure, I guess, is kind of what you're saying.
Not the cure. It's not the cure.
Well, I think one of the most important things that I've realized, and you're confirming, is that we can't base our self-confidence on what other people think of you. And I mean, it's easy to say, but if you look at the single greatest malady that adults and teens deal with, I put myself on that, is, oh crap, I didn't mean to tick them off, or I didn't mean to do. It's always based on what other people think. And so the importance of being you cannot be overemphasized on that. It really is. It doesn't mean blaring, look at me. I mean, it's just, hey, yo, this is what you see, is what you get, man. Oh my goodness. This has been fun, Ivana. I didn't know what to expect just because we're complete strangers, man.
Not anymore, Marie.
Yeah, we're family now.
Definitely not. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable on the show, because there's so many people that I know of in my immediate circle that are going through a lot of these different things themselves. And so your ability to craft what to consider was I think it'll be an easy listen for them too. So I thank you.
Hope so. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.